So, Cheltenham. Up until the 18th century, very, very small, insignificant town. But then it was discovered that the springs in Cheltenham were mineral springs. That meant that in an age when spa bathing was very fashionable, very good business, people started to invest and build lovely houses and gardens and hotels for people to come to Cheltenham, and it grew up as a spa resort. So pretty much everything we see in Cheltenham is less than 300 years old. Even the churches that look much older, they're all Victorian. They're designed to look old. And so, there's a lot of lovely buildings here because it's a place that was designed for entertainment, for people to come and live in nice places and to enjoy the benefits of being in such a stylish town. I'm starting next to one of these Victorian churches, which is beautifully lit up on the tower there. It's called the Old Priory. It's from 1874. It's not one of the haunted spots, but I just thought it was a lovely place to show you, as it's across the road from the building that I actually want to tell you about. And, for anyone who likes spotting scaffolding on tours, you are in luck this evening, because the first place I want to show you is covered in scaffolding at the moment. It's a pub. And it's a Victorian pub. It's been on that street corner here in just outside the town centre for about 150 years. It was originally called the Station. That's because there used to be a railway station very close to here, now gone. There is still a railway station in Cheltenham, but that's the one that is outside the town centre. So the one that was in the town centre back in the 19th century, no longer here. This pub has had various names during the years. Nowadays, it is quite a trendy pub and eating place, and it's called the Bottle of Sauce. Now, the Bottle of Sauce is Cockney rhyming slang. And if you don't know what that is, it's kind of a strange sort of way of talking from the East End of London, where you use things that rhyme rather than saying the actual word. And Bottle of Sauce is Cockney rhyming slang for horse. And that is a reference to the fact that Cheltenham is one of the most important horse racing towns in Britain. But the ghost predates that name. The ghost that is seen here has been seen here for many years, and it's the ghost of a young boy, said to be about the age of 7, and he's wearing quite smart clothing. Now, nobody knows really who he is, but he's been reported walking across the pub, past the doors, from the bar towards the games room at the back, and particularly in the courtyard and outside dining area to the side of the pub. Staff and customers have seen him down the years. And a few years ago, they posted a video on social media, I think it was 2018, that purported to show footage of the ghost. Now, the video was taken from somewhere over by the bar. I'm not going to go in, but you see, over by the bar there, very nice interior. And the camera was pointing in this direction, and towards where we are, just outside these double doors. And what you kind of saw was some kind of, it looked like a figure, very quickly just walked past the doors on the other side of these doors, just inside as I was walking across the doorway. Couldn't really see enough to make out what it was, I didn't think, from the clip of the video I saw online. But they were very excited because they thought they'd finally caught a glimpse of the ghost on video. But personally, I'm not quite so sure. But nobody knows who that ghost might have been in any case. What I can confirm is that it's a very friendly pub. I had a very nice alcohol-free beer in there before I started the tour, but I didn't see the ghost. I looked for him, I looked very hard for him, but no, he wasn't to be found. So we're making our way in towards the centre of Cheltenham, and we're starting to see the kinds of buildings, late 18th, early 19th century buildings, a lot of them built as investments by anyone who had a bit of land here, so that wealthy people could come and enjoy the spa water here, which they might bathe in, and they would drink it, and they'd be able to enjoy all the entertainments at the spa and all of the things that went with it. Now we're going to find another haunted pub in a minute. There's a great Italian style building here that they've made. They made the old building, and the Strozzi Palace. This is a very, I think the Victorian age when Cheltenham was growing up was kind of an age where it did have its own architectural style, but it was also a bit of a, anything goes. You want to do something Italian? You do something Italian. You want to do something that looks like medieval Gothic? You do medieval Gothic. But this is a hotel, and next to the hotel, and kind of now part of it, is a very old pub that dates back to the 1700s, and it's called the St. George's Vaults. And the St. George's Vaults is a pub that has definitely got a reputation for being a haunted one, and that presence has made itself known in a couple of ways. One is through kind of poltergeist activity. In other words, staff and customers, and particularly the landlord. It had the same landlord for about 15 years, a guy called Del Barnes, and he had a lot of strange experiences. Poltergeist activity, glasses just suddenly exploding and flying off the shelves onto the ground, flying across the bar, narrowly missing customers and staff's heads and bashing into the walls. And he also saw repeatedly a figure of what he said looked like a man in a tweed jacket walking across the bar and disappearing through the walls. Now, he and his customers had seen these things many, many times. And he also did a bit of digging into the past of the pub, and he discovered that a former landlord's, who had lived above the pub, one of their kids had also said that in the rooms on the upper floors where the owners lived, they'd seen a figure walking around the rooms there and disappearing through the walls as well. Now, in this case, we don't know who those figures are, but we don't even know if it's always the same person or always that is causing all of this. But what we do know is that the cellars underneath, it's called the St. George's Vaults because it has vaulted cellars underneath it. And now they are the cellars of the pub and the hotel. But back when this building was first created, those vaults that are now the pub cellar were part of a jail. In fact, they were the cells where the condemned prisoners spent their last days. And so it is believed that that is the reason why these strange figures and events are happening in the St. George's Vault, that it's because of the condemned prisoners waiting for their executions in the cells below that are now the pub cellar. Okay, so let's carry on our way a little bit. Another Victorian church masquerading as a much older church here, St. Matthew's. It used to have a tower and a spire, but it was deemed it was not in great condition, and so it was taken down in the 1970s. But it is quite a substantial church. You can see, as the population of Cheltenham grew, even after the days of the spa, it became a very sort of popular and quite expensive place for people to live. A lot of people who'd been on colonial service in the days of the British Empire, military service, when they came back to Britain, they bought property in this area because it was known as a lovely place to live, and there were a lot of houses going when the spa fashion started to dwindle. Selina, I'm not sure exactly where the executions were held. I've not been able to find out. Certainly, we're going back to a time that would have been way before any like modern records, because all of the modern records point to people who were executed for crimes in Cheltenham being taken over to Gloucester, the county town, which is where the big jail and that was the hanging jail. So we're looking at centuries before, but that is certainly what what seems to be the case. Now the lovely building opposite. Now this is the library and the gallery of Cheltenham. So excellent gallery actually, particularly known for its handicrafts and arts and crafts. Particularly the arts and crafts movement in British art and design has a strong link to this region, the Cotswolds and the surrounding area, and they have a fine collection. And as you can imagine, with so many wealthy people, aristocrats and wealthy people having homes and residences here in Cheltenham, there was a lot of artwork that was around in the town, and the collection that the gallery acquired from that is a pretty impressive one, and it's a pretty impressive building actually, the Wilson Art Gallery. Okay, so let's go down Crescent Place. In Crescent Place, we really do start to see the stylish side of this town, and some of the residences here. And look at this beautiful building here that has been redeveloped. They're advertising. Oh, Elizabeth is here. Yeah, they're John Dower House. Look at this. Regency Apartments. Now, I don't know. Can you see the chandeliers there, Elizabeth? No. We were. Or do you want a house with a garden? I don't know. Maybe you could have a Regency apartment as a weekend place next door to a Turkish and Mediterranean restaurant as well. Very nice. And these would have been some of the most exclusive properties in Cheltenham, and that's because just around the corner, the reason this is called Crescent Place is because just around the corner is the Royal Crescent. It's based on the earlier and much more elaborate Royal Crescent in Bath, which was the spa resort that all of the others were trying to emulate. But you can see you've got this curved terrace of houses, speculative development. One of the first to be created here, and it was because royalty gave their seal of approval to Cheltenham as a spa town in the person of King George III. He and his family came here several times, and he recommended it to other friends, other aristocrats, and those kinds of things. So that is what led to the development of such grand properties, because they knew that this was a place that was becoming popular with the wealthiest and most affluent people in the country who wanted to come here. And we see again here these fantastic buildings with these very typical balconies. Now, these are typical of Cheltenham. You wouldn't find balconies like this so much in Bath, and that's because Bath was much earlier and was distinctively Georgian, whereas Cheltenham grew up more towards the end of George III's reign and the beginning of George IV. So it was like the Regency period. And these wrought iron balconies with a little roof on the top, because as you will know if you've watched my tours in recent days, it does rain sometimes in this country. That is one of the most distinctive architectural features of Cheltenham. Donna, it was called Cheltenham Spa. The railway station is still called Cheltenham Spa, but it was never really, I don't think it's ever really been called Cheltenham Spa so much, not like Leamington Spa, probably because Leamington already existed as a town before it became a spa resort, whereas Cheltenham, it kind of, if it wasn't for the spa bit, it wouldn't be here at all. Now, it's a very grand residence here. It's called Promenade House, and it began life as a grand residence, but later it became commercial premises. These days it's a bar, but the reports of the hauntings here are not so much from more recent years when it's been a bar, but date back to its previous use, which was as the main office and printing centre for the local newspaper. And the people who were working there, obviously as a newspaper is a hive of activity, but then there's always somebody there, and in the middle of the night there's always somebody there making sure the print running is going, or working on a story that they've been late into the night. And so it was a place where there were people around when things were not quite so busy, and that's the time when people tend to notice things, if there's anything to be noticed. And people would feel there, they would hear footsteps coming through the office or the printing shop. They'd turn round, nobody there. They would look back the way the footsteps continue, and then they feel someone brush past them, or they hear voices as though someone's walking past them. Never anybody there. But that was something that was quite common in this building when it was the local newspaper. I think nowadays it's probably never quiet enough. In a bar, it's probably never quiet enough to... Now, we're going to look at another place that's... One of the things you find in Cheltenham, a lot of places have been converted into bars. And some of them reported ghosts before they were bars, some of them since. And in this case, we are talking about one that has reported ghosts since they were a bar. This is a bar called Revolution. It's a chain. Actually, it's had the bar. There's been several different named bars here, but as you can see, the building was originally a chapel. In fact, it was a Baptist chapel. It was called the Salem Baptist Chapel. Oh, hello, Mrs. Braesby. Nice to see you. The Salem Baptist Chapel here in Cheltenham was built in 1844, and it was the home to one of the local Baptist congregations for their services until 1998. But, like a lot of churches around that time, they had dwindling congregations, and so the congregation merged with another Baptist chapel in the town, and they decided to sell off this building, and it was sold off and converted into a bar. Now, some of the congregation were not happy, particularly that their old church had been converted into a bar. And it appears that some of the worshippers from years gone by might not have been too happy either, because over the time since this has been a bar, people have reported a lot of poltergeist activity within there. Again, it's a bar, you've got a lot of glasses, so things are quite noticeable, but people's drinks just move across the table, fall off onto the ground and smash. Sometimes chairs just fall over for no apparent reason, with no one there. These are the kinds of things that are happening there, as though someone is just trying to send a subtle little hint that they don't want the people in there. It seems to be concentrated on the upper floor where there's a balcony. Now, again, I'm not going to go inside, but what I can do is show you just a little bit like what it looks like inside. We can look through the window. And you might be able to see there's kind of a balcony going over the top of where we are now. Like a lot of 19th century chapels, it had a balcony upstairs. You can see the stairs going up there to the balcony. And that is where this activity has been concentrated. Oh, right, time to cross the road again. And we're going to go in search of another public building from the town's history that has been converted into a pub and restaurant. It really does seem like every single thing in Cheltenham has been converted into a pub and restaurant. They did used to call it the town built for leisure and pleasure. I think that's something that still seems to be true today. Yeah. Coming into the heart of the sort of the modern heart of the town now. It is quite a good shopping centre. People do come from roundabout to shop here, and there's a lot of designer stores as well, those kinds of things. It's still a very affluent area, that's for sure. Population of about 120,000 in Cheltenham these days. Wow. Not a red telephone box, but public telephone. Look at that. That's all. They're rarer than ghosts these days, public telephones are. Well, talking of public telephones. How many? 6 of them? If you want to know where all the public telephone boxes in Gloucestershire have gone. Here they are on the promenade in Cheltenham. So let's head down a very dark-looking alleyway. But you can see again, look at the grand architecture, everything here built with the idea of impressing. You know, I don't know, these were department stores and retail businesses built in the 19th century, banks. This one was certainly a bank. But we are going to go. No. We're going to venture down the back streets. You see, this is what I mean when I say on a ghost tour, you go to places where you maybe wouldn't normally go. You know, I'm not going to be doing a walking tour of Cheltenham and bring people along here. That is for sure certain. But what we get to is a fantastic building. This was the courthouse, the Victorian courthouse, built here between 1869 and 71. And it was the courthouse until about 30 years ago, I believe. And nowadays it is, well, for a while it was Jamie Oliver's restaurant that was in there, Jamie's Italian. But now it is an independent, and it's imaginatively named the Old Courthouse. So upstairs is where the main courtroom is, and the phrase called to the bar that the lawyers might use has very literal meaning, because where the bench was at the front of the courtroom is now where the bar is. And the downstairs is where the judges and the lawyers had their offices, and they are now just other rooms for dining and for having a drink. Again, isn't it a beautiful, grand building? Amazing. But, okay, here's a couple of ghosts associated with it, and these are ghosts that are not ones that have been seen since it converted into a bar specifically. They have, but they were also seen in the courtroom. The first of them, if you go in there now for a drink, you might need to use the bathrooms. Then you'll go downstairs into the basement. And of course, what is in the basement in a courthouse? Well, that's where the cells were. And that is an area where people hear heavy doors slamming when there's no heavy doors there. Very heavy footsteps on tiled floors. And people have also even said that they've seen the figure of a young boy running around down there. Down in the basement seems to be a spot where there's definitely some kind of ghostly presence. This floor, you're okay. Top floor, the old courtroom, well, the judge's chair is still in there. It's kind of just in there as a feature. But one of the things that people used to say about the judge's chair in this courthouse and now in the pub and restaurant is that sometimes you look at the judge's chair and it will appear that there is someone seated on there. They don't look quite corporeal in the sense that they look a little bit shadowy, but then they just disappear. And it is believed that the judge's chair could be a place where some of the judges are still sitting, because there are records of 2 separate judges who actually died whilst presiding in this courtroom both of them of heart attacks, years apart. But that is why people have been reporting that they sometimes see figures sitting in the judge's chair, even though there's no longer any judges to be seen. And I'm hoping that we can, again, I'll just show you the grand building. You won't go too far in. Look at this. What a lovely building. That's okay. Sorry. It's a great building. Ooh, I tell you something. Whatever they're serving on the menu, it smells tasty. Now, when my time comes, if I were a resident of Cheltenham, I would say that when my time was to come, this is the place I'd want to haunt. It's one of the best cheese shops in the area. The cheese works, and it appears to already have some ghosts hanging up, but they're made out of cheesecloths. That's quite clever, quite creative. But that's not what we're here to talk about. I don't know of any current ghosts in the cheese shop. The place I do know of some ghosts is this beautiful building. And this beautiful building is the Everyman Theatre. Actually, originally, when it opened in 1891, it was called the New Theatre and Opera House. And as you can see, it's an absolutely stunning piece of architecture. Indoors, inside and out. The interior particularly is an absolute masterpiece of late Victorian theatre design. And it is designed by a man who is absolutely famous in this country for his theatre building, a chap by the name of Frank Matcham. And the interior, particularly here at the Everyman, is considered Matcham's masterpiece. So it's still in operation, having started life in 1891, and it seats about 700 and still has a wide variety of shows on. But of course, one of the things that I think everybody knows is that actors and theatre people are among the most superstitious people that you could possibly meet. And almost every theatre has some kind of strange story about it. The Everyman is no exception. In fact, it has 2. The first is a very strange sensation and experience that people have had down the years. And that is, this affects people when the theatre is empty. So either on a non-show day or late at night after a show. People have also reported it sitting in the auditorium if they get there very, very early and there's only a couple of people in. And what they notice, what happens is that music suddenly appears. There's no band playing it, nothing piped through the speakers, but it doesn't really sound like music that you'd hear in a theatre, but some kind of strange music that gets louder and faster. And as that happens, it starts coming from different directions. So it'll be coming from your right, and then it'll jump, and it'll be coming from above you, and then it'll be coming from your left. And when people hear the music, they experience this kind of sensation, like a tingling sensation, and this real feeling of heaviness and fatigue as though they can't move. And then just after a little while, it just goes away and everything's silent again. So strange goings on with the music in there. And there is also a ghostly figure that is seen on the balcony of the auditorium. And it is very clearly seen many times over the years particularly by staff, because they're the people who are there when it's empty. If you're watching if you're there to watch a performance and you see someone standing on the balcony, well, there's hundreds of people in there, so you don't really notice. But it's a lady, and people have said that she is dressed in the kind of clothing that people would have been wearing around the time this theatre opened. So in the late 19th, very early 20th century. And people have linked, because, sometimes when you get a ghost, it's better if you can put a name to it. And it's even better if you can put a famous person's name to it. And there's a lot of people who have started to sort of tell the tale that the female figure on the balcony here at the Everyman is one of two very famous actresses from that period. One of them is called Dame Ellen Terry, who appeared here on many occasions. And the other is Lily Langtry. Now, Lily Langtry was a very famous actress at that time. And in fact, she appeared here on stage on the opening night of this theatre in 1891. She was known not only for her acting, but also for being one of many lovers of the future King Edward VII. And of course, it's a much better story if you can attach such famous names to the ghost that's seen there. But there's absolutely... helicopter, they're coming for me. There's absolutely no reason to link anything that in the life or death of Lily Langtry or Ellen Terry to this theatre. Neither of them died in Cheltenham, neither of them had any particular major traumatic life events that happened in Cheltenham. It seems to be there's an unexplained and unidentified female figure from that period in the theatre, and people are attaching these two names to it. It's something that happens quite a lot. You have to be very careful when you sort of first see some of the stories, because you need to have a little bit of a look to see whether there's any reason why. There's generally a reason why a particular person would be said to haunt a place. Hello, Linda. Sorry, or maybe you joined ages ago. There's something really strange has been happening with the chat. I seem to have there's a couple of comments at the top and bottom of the screen that I think had been there since the start of the tour and never moved, and all the others just keep popping up between them. I did hear of something like this happening. I think Leonie said she had a similar problem with that last night, or maybe Natalie. Oh, Japanese restaurant here, very nice, very pretty. Lovely buildings. The coffee dispensary. And coffee for medicinal purposes now, that's the kind of thing I like. People used to come here for the spa water for medicinal purposes. Maybe they're coming for the coffee now. Now the next building I want to show you is another place of nighttime entertainment. It is called the Moo Moo Club. Moo Moo, like what a cow says. And the building itself, it looks to me like it might once have been a chapel or something of that nature. But I can't actually find any reference to it being anything other than a place of entertainment. So maybe it was just a commercial building built in that kind of style. This is not it. This is just another example of some beautiful Cheltenham architecture. And so there are two kind of nightclubs next to each other. I remember I stayed There's nothing to do with the ghost stories. But I stayed in Cheltenham with a group for 5 nights a few years ago, and a couple of these chaps from the group, the one morning they were looking a little bit worse for wear, and I said, "Are you guys okay?" They said, "Yeah, we went out and went to a nightclub in the centre of town." I thought, a nightclub in the centre of Cheltenham? It was something like a Tuesday night or something. I was really surprised to find that such things existed, but they do. And they've got the lights on since I walked past earlier. And here's Moo Moo. Now, Moo Moo is a place that was experiencing a lot of poltergeist activity in terms of items moving around the place, floating through the air, all of these kinds of things. So much so, and so much of an impact it was having on the staff, that a few years ago, before it was called Moo Moo, actually, it used to be called Blush Nightclub, they called in a priest to perform an exorcism. And he walked around the building and he said, wow, one exorcism is not going to be enough, because he said that he felt as though there was a separate ghost almost in every room. That's how many different presences there were within this building. And so he did all the necessary things that he needed to do. He went away, and they still had the occasional thing being reported, but actually it was much less. And another strange thing happened as well, and that's that the owner or the manager at the time had a dog. And he used to sometimes, if he was coming in the daytime to do a bit of work or something, he'd bring his dog. But there were some times when his dog would just refuse to go inside. It just would not step over the threshold at all. But after the exorcism had been done, no problem. Every single time the dog would just walk in, wagging its tail, no problem at all. So maybe the dog knew something that the owner didn't. You trust the dog? Well, there are a lot of stories about animals being much more sensitive to things like ghosts. I've read and heard so many stories. There's one of the pubs in Birmingham that is said to be haunted. And my colleague, who I do ghost tours with in Birmingham, he was walking his dog, and it was a dog that had guide dog training, but was never actually used as a guide dog for the blind. So it was a really well-trained dog, not a dog to be put off. But as he was walking past this pub, the dog stopped before it got to the pub, and it would not continue. He could not make this dog move. He took the dog across the road. It walked past on the other side of the road. They crossed back. He tried to go back past the pub, going the other direction. Same problem. The dog would not walk outside this pub that is reputed to be one of the most haunted pubs in Birmingham. So yeah, it is often said that animals have different, more sensitive reactions to certain things. I mean, we know that the senses of animals are, far, far superior to our own in many ways. Yeah, you like the lights? He was talking about the lights. Renata, yeah, there are some, the buildings are really nicely lit up, and I'm really pleased to see. Maybe it says something about the affluence of Cheltenham, because I know that a lot of places are saying that they're not going to be putting the lights specifically to sort of show off any of the buildings because of the electricity costs. But they certainly seem to be, they've got street lights, but also, some of the buildings have been lit by spotlights and things as well, which I noticed in Oxford last night. A couple of really iconic buildings that are normally spotlit at night time, they weren't. So I'm going to take a little wander along the road here, and we've seen one theatre, the Everyman Theatre. The Everyman Theatre is very much the top theatre where famous names, shows with well-known people in them come to. But there's another theatre very close to here called the Playhouse. And the Playhouse Theatre is much more of a community theatre. It's where you'll find shows by local amateur and semi-professional groups. They run kind of theatre classes for kids and community activities. So it's very much a community thing. And it was actually set up during the years of the Second World War as a community theatre, with the idea that people's morale would have been improved during those years of war by having entertainments and being able to participate in more entertainments. They also had stationed in Cheltenham an awful lot of US service personnel who were stationed here. This was the main headquarters for the US logistics, planning and communications and intelligence in Europe in the latter stages of World War II. So there were an awful lot of US servicemen here. They needed entertaining. They needed somewhere to go to meet some local young girls, of course. Now, and before we get to down the corner to the Playhouse, the front of it, there's a very interesting building here that I'd never noticed before tonight, because usually if I come here, I don't often come along here walking. I come along here in the car and I'm turning around to the right. So I'm not. I think they might have been to Barcelona. looks like one of Gaudi's creations in Barcelona. That kind of thing. Something that might be up at the Park Güell in Barcelona. That kind of thing. If you've ever been there. So here's the Cheltenham Playhouse. Now the Cheltenham Playhouse was not always a theatre, so they didn't build a theatre in the middle of World War II. They converted an existing building into a theatre. And it was a building that was originally built in the 19th century as a spa bath. And it was, one of the biggest parts of the spa at that time. It was a place where people could come and bathe in the water. They could drink the waters. They had a pool where people could swim in the mineral bath. They also had a lab in there where they would distill the Cheltenham mineral waters and extract the mineral crystals and sell them so that people could then take them home and bathe in Cheltenham water or drink Cheltenham water in the comfort of their own homes. So it was a very, very big operation during the spa time. And later it was converted into a public swimming pool. And they also had it was one of these Victorian swimming pools where you could cover over the actual pool so that you could use that surface for dancers, for sports, for gymnastics, whatever you wanted to do. They even apparently had cycle racing in there at one time. But it was that area that was converted into the actual auditorium of the Playhouse. Now, this is a theatre with even more ghosts than the Everyman, even though it's not been here for anywhere near as long. First one is they believe it's the ghost of a caretaker, because people in the dressing rooms for the theatre, if they've got the dressing room door closed, they hear footsteps coming along the corridor outside and the sound of a broom or a brush sweeping the floor, as though someone's coming along tidying up, as the caretaker would after a performance or a rehearsal. But if they were to open the door, they can hear it, but nobody is there. Within the auditorium, there is also reported to be in the seats an elderly couple, who are seen by staff after a performance. And what will happen is that the audience watch the performance, they go home, the auditorium's empty, some of the, the staff will go in to check, start clearing up and everything, and they will see that there's a couple of people still sitting there, and then they will think, okay, why have these people not gone home yet? And as they approach, then the people just kind of disappear into thin air. So there are those. Like the pub where we began a few years ago, someone who was visiting the theatre was just taking some shots of the auditorium, and when they looked at them on their computer, one of the shots appeared to show in one of the boxes on the balcony the figure of a man standing there, and they knew that when they'd been in there, they were the person taking the photo and the person who'd let them in were the only two people in the building. They'd let themselves in when it was closed. So there was that. And the CCTV did something funny a couple of years ago as well. 4 a.m. CCTV here is a motion sensitive thing. So, it's not on all the time, but the CCTV motion sensor was triggered at 4 a.m. one day. So when they watched the footage back, and again, I've seen this, they posted it online. There's absolutely nothing there. The camera's pointing down, there's nothing there. It's in kind of the lounge area of the theatre. Nothing there. But the only thing that does happen is at the time that it gets triggered, there's a bright sort of flash of light. Now, there are no lights or anything like that in front of the camera that would be able to do that. So there's not really any proper good explanation for what that was that has tripped their CCTV in the middle of the night. And there's one final ghost in this building that I want to tell you about, and she is one that has been with relative certainty identified. And it's the ghost of a little girl. And she is seen sitting on the stage. And it is believed to be the ghost of an 11-year-old girl called Lillian Davis. And in 1896, that swimming pool I mentioned was covered over, and there was gym equipment set out there. And Lillian Davis was in there doing gymnastics with a whole bunch of other people. But, the vaulting horse, big, heavy vaulting horse that you use, imagine how solid the materials they'd have been built of back in 1896. The leg of the vaulting horse gave way as Lillian was next to it. It knocked her over, and as the vaulting horse fell over, it landed on her head. It crushed her skull, and she was killed on that spot. And the spot where Lillian Davis was killed by that piece of faulty gym equipment back in 1896 is exactly where the stage of the modern theatre is, where the ghost of the little girl is seen. Now I'm going to finish this tour by telling you a story of a haunting in Cheltenham that is one of the best documented and best investigated Victorian hauntings. Unfortunately, I can't take you to the place where it actually was, showing you the beautiful glass here, the beautiful windows here on this spa bath. Amazing, isn't it? Amazing. The coat of arms of Cheltenham there. We're looking at it from the back here. The house concerned with this haunting is right on the edge of town. It's on one of the kind of most upmarket roads of Cheltenham. And when I post a picture of it, you'll understand. I did drive up there earlier and take a photograph of it for you, because I definitely wanted to include it. And it's a story that's become known as simply the Cheltenham haunting or the Cheltenham ghost. And it concerns a house which was called Garden Reach, was later known as St. Anne's. As you can see, a very grand house. I put it in the chat. You can feel free to enlarge it and take a look at it as I tell you a bit about the story. It is a very grand house, even by Cheltenham standards. And the family that bought it in 1882, they were a wealthy family, was a military officer who had done very well for himself, and he and his wife and their 5 children moved into that house. I think they had domestic staff as well. Now, when they moved in, somebody in the area told them that, there was, there was rumours that it was haunted, but they didn't really think anything of it. But some of the people in the family, particularly a couple of the older daughters of the captain and visitors who came to the house as well, they used to say that they saw a woman dressed in black walking across the landing. She would always take the same route. She'd come down the landing, down the stairs. She'd go into one of the downstairs rooms and stand behind the sofa, and then she would walk towards the door and disappear. Now, people, every time, the exact same place, the exact same thing. Always black, face not really visible. Now, at the time, there was a new organisation for the investigation of supernatural events had been set up in London. It was called the National Psychical Institution or Association. I don't remember which. And the chairman of this organisation, a chap by the name of Myers, he came here, and it was one of their very first investigations. And they are still going today, and they still have this reports in the archive of Myers' investigation in 1882. And he looked into the history of the house, and what he discovered was that a lot of the troubles around the house, especially in terms of the neighbours starting to have bad feelings about the house, concerned a previous resident called Swinhoe, I think James Swinhoe. Now, James Swinhoe had lived there until 6 years before, and the house had been empty ever since. He lived there, first of all, with his wife, Elizabeth, and then she passed away. And that was when things started to go a little bit wrong in the neighbourhood, because he started to drink heavily. He remarried a lady called Imogen, who was also a drinker. And the two of them started to develop quite a reputation for being kind of disorderly in the area when they'd been drinking and having arguments with the neighbours, and generally not the kind of people you want to be, not the kind of behaviour you'd want if you were living in the kind of neighbourhood where that house is. And eventually in 1776, Imogen left the house. She moved to Bristol. Just a couple of weeks later, the owner, Swinhoe, he died, and word came back that she had also died very shortly afterwards in Bristol. And then the house stood empty for 6 years until the family of the captain moved in. Now, the daughter who had reported seeing the ghost most often was the oldest daughter. She was in her teens. She was called Rose. And so Mr. Myers, he had managed to track down pictures of Imogen and Elizabeth Swinhoe. And as they'd been the last residents of the building and the only former residents that he'd been able to trace, he thought it would be worth showing her. She took a good long look at both ladies and said that the woman that she was pretty sure that the woman she had seen in the house many, many times walking down the stairs dressed in black was the second wife, Imogen Swinhoe. And that was what went into the report that is still there in the archives. In time, the family moved out, but the stories of the ghosts there continued from subsequent residents. Not quite as regularly as when the first family were there. The house later became a small private school in the early 20th century, and some of the pupils at the school used to report seeing a figure dressed in black walking around the building and also the gardens. So it was something that went on a long, long time, and it was so well documented and investigated because it happened to be the first major case that Myers investigated after becoming the first chairman of this paranormal investigation group in London, if you like, if you want to put it that way. Now, his reports have been kind of looked at in more recent times. They have been kind of studied by more modern investigators, and they've come up with a couple of alternative theories. I just thought I'd tell you because I think one of them particularly is quite amusing. One of them is simply that because so many people have been telling the family, that this house they were moving into was haunted, they were predisposed to interpret any unusual sounds they heard or anything unusual they might have thought they'd seen out of the corner of their eye. They were predisposed to interpret that in a certain way, and they may not have really seen as clearly what they said they had. Maybe because the human brain is a very powerful thing. It seeks patterns, seeks to interpret things in a way that makes sense. But the other theory that has been put forward, the other idea, is that the whole thing, they were all fooled, they were all tricked. There was no ghost. The man of the house was keeping a mistress, and she would try to sneak out of the house without anyone noticing. But sometimes she would be spotted, in which case she would hurry on her way and make her way out of the house as quickly as she could. And that's why she never spoke to anyone and tried not to have her face seen by the people there. So the Cheltenham ghost up there at St. Anne's, you take your pick. It might be the ghost of Imogen Swinhoe. It might be a family who were making more of things than might actually have been there. But it could have been something very, very mundane, like an adulterous captain and his mistress trying to conceal her identity. We'll never know, I guess. That brings us to the end of our tour, dead on the hour mark, and I hope you've enjoyed it. It's been a little bit different to some of the other ones, but Cheltenham is such a lovely place, and I know that it always looks great at night, especially the whitewashed architecture here. It's a beautiful town, and I definitely wanted to include it on this set of 10 tours.